This low-budget commercial content job for Carl Friedrich was one full of problem-solving, in-the-moment decisions, challenges, and some sneaky VFX. In this video, I'm going to break down my role as the director on this job, how we approached it all, and what we learned from it, because there was a number of learnings on this one. This video is sponsored by Audio, the affordable online music and sound effect licensing platform that is underscoring my voice right now. This one was with family favourites, Detail Films, so it was repeat work. I've done tons as a director with Detail before, including these recipe films for Chase Drinks, this mixed media mashup for Fenton, and a never-seen documentary series about the future of healthcare for None of Your Business. Helen, the in-house producer there, said, "Hola, amigo. How you been? Just had a job come through and I thought it could be of interest." She sent me a link to the creative deck. I responded, "HT. Burning the candle at one end, but good. How the f*** are you and when's the hen do? Looks sick. Would be mega keen, to be honest. Got some references and match cut ideas already. First flag though is it's pretty tricky / incredibly expensive to shoot in airports. Has this got healthy budget or have you already had a look at this?" Yeah, this is my concern. I was mega keen for a few reasons. It was something a little different. I had some previous luggage experience having worked with luxury brand Rimowa, but was keen to get something else like this on the reel because, and I don't want to sound ungrateful to the universe, but a lot of the bigger paying commercial jobs that I've done over the past year have been in the food and drink world. And I'm really keen to not get pigeonholed as purely a food and drinks director. So any opportunities to make something fun that could potentially be reel worthy, then I'm down. What preceded was lots of back and forth over recommends, how we could maybe dress places to look like an airport, airports that other directors and producers had suggested to me as more affordable shooting options, and lots of emails from Helen to various locations getting quotes and price lists. The budget wasn't huge, and even the cheapest location option was going to cost an absolute fortune. And the hourly location fee got more expensive the larger the crew we had, so we tried to be clever with some Swiss Army knife-style legends in Callum and Nathan as the key crew members to join Helen and myself. Both Callum and Nathan have skills in DPing, lighting, gripping, so they're both all-round problem solvers, which is exactly what this job needed. It wasn't the kind of job that I had to pitch on to win. The company came to Detail with their already outlined creative. I just had to think about the deck that the creatives at the company had shared. The idea of the case journeying through an airport, much like an F1 car racing around a track. This, along with a combination of references from other ads and a smattering of AI-generated images in their deck. I then had to think about some ideas, which would include match cuts and some fun camera rigs. They wanted to know how it will flow, so I drew up some very rubbish scribbles / storyboards for most of the shots in the little time I had to prep for the shoot, along with an image of theirs I recycled and a written description of what would be happening in each frame. I wanted to do way more match cuts than we ended up doing. We'll get to that. But first off, we need to work out some grip rigs ahead of the shoot. So Callum and I took the time to get together at mine the day before the shoot to mess around with some cases and test out some builds. Ideally, we would have had more time ahead of the shoot in case some of the rigs didn't work, but this was the soonest that we could get hold of any of the cases. Ahead of shooting, knowing that we weren't going to have the time, equipment, or crew to do this all properly, Callum and I decided to shoot this all on Sony FX3s. As they would be small and lightweight, as well as being cheap to rent. So in addition to Will from Detail's personal one, we could afford to hire a second body in to be rigging things whilst the other camera was in use. Or in one instance, have 2 shots rigged at the same time. On the morning of our test day, a whole bunch of cases, one of which we had permission to cut through, arrived at my house. We started with a very simple rig. A simple rig for a shot that never actually ended up happening. Again, we'll get to that.
All right, ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right, 3, 2, action.
For the more complex rigs, at first I thought we needed to be rock steady with some scaff poles and rigging that Callum managed to get hold of via his dad, who works in construction. But very quickly realised how heavy this rig was going to be, and without a proper dolly to rig the rig to, Callum and I decided to try with a lighter weight C-stand arm set up first. We used a K-clamp and some Cardellini clamps inside the case to hold the rod in place and stop it rotating, as well as some heavy-rated shot bags inside to give the case some weight. We then rigged 2 more arms using knuckles off of that first arm and attached those to an underslung tripod, bungeed to my poor man's Wally Dolly that regularly likes to lose a nut and drop a wheel. Why go to all this trouble?
Oh my god, it's so good!
It is very fun.
To lock the case in place in the center of the frame and match cut it seamlessly at different stages throughout its journey. We tried 2 other rigs. One quite simple, less secure wheel POV shot using a magic arm and another Cardellini clamp, and an even less secure crash swing rig using a, you guessed it, Cardellini clamp, loose knuckle, C-stand arm, and another magic arm with a spigot. The idea being that we were going to follow the top of the case as it had a collision with another case. And as that happened, our camera would ramp speed into slow motion, flying around the crash scene of the 2 cases colliding. This one I felt less certain about, but it was going to be worth a try. The shoot itself, well, that's where all the learnings happened, unfortunately for us. Our day began at a very reasonable 8:30 a.m. in the staff car park at Stansted Airport, just outside of London. But fortunately for me, out the correct side of London for this to be one of the quickest commutes I've had to work in a long time. We loaded up the Adicam cart with everything we thought we needed and a few extra bits and pieces on a couple of airport trolleys, including the cases we'd be filming with. It was the first time any of us were legitimately shooting in an airport. And before we get into it, I'll just say that most of the things that didn't go to plan could have been avoided with a simple recce. I want to say that there's no excuses, but follow that up immediately with an excuse. We should have recce'd, but there just wasn't really time. The job hadn't been signed off until 4 working days before, and up until the day when Callum and myself were prepping our rigs, we'd all been busy on other jobs before the shoot day. If I'd realised how detrimental not recceing was going to be to this shoot, then I would have honestly taken time out of my weekend if the airport could have accommodated to recce it then. I say detrimental as if this whole thing was a massive balls up. It wasn't. The client was ultimately happy, but both me and Callum were working to make this a real worthy piece, and I'm not sure we quite got near what we were hoping for. We made the long journey to the terminal with our trolleys, met with our chaperones, and signed out various ID passes that had been made up for us ahead of time. We'd all had to send scans of our passports and fill out forms ahead of the shoot, as well as making sure that we brought these with us to the airport as a form of ID and to get through security. If we hadn't, we weren't going to be allowed to go airside. I had been curiously concerned with how long it was going to take to get all of this kit through security, but we've been told that we can go through the staff entrance and they give us a free extra hour to do this, although they said we probably wouldn't need all this time, so that was going to be bonus time for filming. I think we originally had 5 hours booked to get our shots. 5 hours at £805 an hour. Unfortunately, security was a bit of a shit show. In the end, it took over an hour, going back and forth, unpacking some items, being told to take some items through the gate and some through the scanner, all whilst having to queue with, and no doubt piss off, tons of airline and airport staff. Lenses, batteries, cameras, they were swabbing a lot, which is understandable. But I thought surely there must be a better way to film in an airport. Once we'd finally cleared security, my soon-to-become favourite chaperone told me most crews just drove their equipment in kit vans airside and just have a spot check of a few items. It would have been amazing if we'd been told this before, but I guess we didn't ask. So now we all know for next time. On account of our budget and the hourly shoot fee that increased depending on how many people we had with us, we had a small crew, and we were packed relatively light. A couple of lights and some negative fill if we were going to need it. My poor man's Wally Dolly, Callum's gimbal. But we were going to be relying mostly on a beautiful sunny day and knowing where to point and not point the camera. But also having been told the fantastic news that our final deliverable wasn't in 9:16, we decided to shoot on Callum's Atlas Mercury Anamorphics to do what Anamorphics do so well and make the ordinary feel less ordinary. When we weren't going to be able to have all that much time to finesse. We also added my 28mm DZO Pavo Anamorphic to the set for some of the wider shots. Now, why not shoot all on my DZOs? Because Callum likes to think for the more money he paid for his Mercuries that they are noticeably better. They're not. These are arguably my 2 favourite shots of the whole thing, and they were shot on the DZO. Just saying. Don't try and tell me you can tell which is which unless you're a camera nerd and getting heavy with the flares. In addition to producer Helen, myself, Callum and Nathan, our nimble crew had Alia joining us as a runner / camera assistant / whatever role needed filling. There were also 2 agency members, the on-camera talent and, as always frustratingly on any jobs like these, a stills team that were meant to be shooting alongside, but ultimately did nibble into our time and resources as we did into theirs when we needed the talent and they had them, and vice versa. Piggybacking to save money on jobs like these always results in worse outcomes for both mediums. I wish this practice would stop, but it's unlikely to anytime soon in a world of shrinking budgets.
All right, how much rotate do you want?
Well, it's 90 degrees. 90 degrees, yeah, the backpack will be straight line.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
3.
But I'm also just thinking, just so we have a B, you should probably start moving with him.
And then pull out. Okay, cool. Ready?
And action.
I need to set the focus the right way. I have it. Yeah, that's bugging me out. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah.
Because of our limited numbers, everyone other than Callum and the stills team were an on-camera extra at some point. That's including our chaperones, and both our runner and one of our agency members made it into almost every shot that required extras. But you wouldn't have known.
See, I'm not sure following works. Because it's weird to then just boom out.
It's just because I want to unload it to, it's more for the cut. Okay, set.
Nearly. Alright, set.
Okay, and action. Action, Nathan. Action, honey. Okay. So, what did our lack of recce not teach us, other than the security load-in situation? Well, ahead of the shoot, based on the locations available to shoot, I'd made a schedule of where we'd get what shots, but like an absolute mug, hadn't scheduled the travel time between the locations. That's my failing as a first AD, which I may not have mentioned, but yeah, I was first ADing this too, I guess, alongside Helen, who was getting nervous about the overtime charges. Not only were some of these locations naturally 15 to 20 minutes apart on foot, regardless of carrying kit, but our chaperones had to piggy back and forth between the group. Things like elevators meant some of us would be waiting, unable to move on ahead without the whole group and our minders. They had a silly rule about no large equipment allowed on the trains between gates. So 3 of us had to drag, push and pull kit across the asphalt, which not only took ages, but was physically pretty tiring. Particularly on a day when we had a working lunch, due to client not being prepared to pay for our lunch break. Semi-understandable at £805 an hour plus VAT. Things were starting to run further and further behind as we went, and we were having to sacrifice quality for this. The time to throw in a light or block off some light to get that extra take we so desperately needed. We didn't have art department, so we were moving bins, borrowing chairs and tables from outside WH Smith, and using all of our bodies to maximum capacity on camera. We didn't have capacity for wireless and client monitors, and I would on occasion be standing in if the talent was elsewhere and we only had enough supervision for 3 of us to be in this one area. So then we'd spend time reviewing the shot off of camera because that was the best we could do, rather than being able to give notes in real time. Not great for our tight schedule.
Let's go to this one.
There was blocking to be considered, but we couldn't just rock up, shoot the shot and leave. We needed to rehearse. We also had to wear these hideously distracting high-vis jackets everywhere, and the amount of shots that we had to reshoot because a high-vis jacket creeped into a reflection, well, there are at least 2. For this screen replacement shot, we put some tape up to act as tracking markers. We'll talk more about that shot later. We were heading to my house after the airport for a bunch of shots for the sequence. We needed to be fairly time-specific for the light outside the entrance to the airport, and production couldn't afford the overtime. So the pressure was really on to move as fast as possible. We headed back over to the main terminal to a private X-ray scanner room we'd been told we could film in. We had asked several times for photos of this room, but hadn't received, and only learned upon entering that we weren't actually going to be able to film half of the things that we had scheduled to be shooting in there, because there were supposedly several parts of the secret scanner that we weren't allowed to show, which I'm not so sure on myself, as I went through this airport only a week later and saw the exact same scanners out in the public security section. But we obviously had to do what we were told. So there I was, thinking on my feet. Well, I guess we could lose this shot in the sequence. Not what we planned, but it could still work, as long as we got our overhead shot for our match frame, which we did get good enough, but not great, after a lot of faffing. Struggling to see what we were actually shooting because it turns out the camera we'd rigged up on our shitty rig had a faulty HDMI port, and the time to switch camera around didn't seem worth it in the pressure rushing schedule we were under, because at this point we were now into overtime, past our schedule, and Helen was understandably cacking her pants about the budget. Again, we didn't have the time to finesse lighting here how we would have wanted. with a bigger budget, more chaperones and a recce, we could have had a team here setting up the lighting before we'd even arrived. We would have had heavy-duty, non-wobbly grip equipment, and we would have already known what we weren't going to be able to shoot, so we could have redressed or rethought appropriately. Also, this bump in the clearly unweighted case really bothers me here. I didn't notice it on the tiny review screen at the time, but I would have added weights to the case or stuck it down with tape on the bottom so it didn't do that, but c'est la vie. It's just a video. We eventually got landside, now well into overtime, but because we were outside the front and the stills team had left us long ago, 2 of the chaperones were able to be released, lessening the building financial implications. Our talent was getting impatient and grumpy, always fun, and everyone was knackered. It was decided by the agency, our client, whilst in the security scene setup, that they didn't think we needed the originally boarded shots anymore. We had definitely lost our light opportunity to shoot on the street near mine, but we could still have lit the bedroom scene and gone as late as we needed to in order to make this work. But I was happy with this decision, because just like everyone else, I was knackered. I knew sticking to the original plan was going to take at least 2 to 3 hours once we were back at mine, and we were all ready for what had turned into a mad day to be over. So with the pressure a little bit off, we raced against the light to get the last few shots, only one of which actually made it into the final cut, but it is what ended up becoming the opening shot. Outside the front of Stansted Airport isn't the best for filming, as it's relatively small and littered with smokers and public foot traffic that we weren't able to control. So we hugged the end of the building, opting to change our full frame case shot we'd worked on our rig so hard for entirely, to avoid the rubbish looking shaky concrete surface we had to work with there. I love all the reflections off the glass here though, and we got really lucky just making it with the last remaining light that we so badly needed for this shot. We pushed the kit back to the car park, packed everything away and headed home via a cheeky Burger King to replenish our reserves after an intense day's filming. How this was going to all come together in post had not been finalised up front. A slightly unnerving situation to be in, one that I've been in plenty of times before, but also freeing because you can start with some more flexibility in how it's all going to come together. We started off by myself doing the first edit and round of amends before leaving it all in the capable hands of Detail's in-house editor Jess. The whole brief was likening this case's journey around an airport to that of an F1 race. Something with high energy, a start, a pit stop, an incident. So I began by watching a bunch of F1 clips on YouTube to get an idea of the language that F1 commentators here in the UK use, before spending some time putting together a commentator script I thought could tie the whole thing together and build a bit of tension throughout. From the boards, I had a pretty clear idea of how the sequence would go, but we obviously hadn't got all the shots that we needed, so this was going to require a bit of a rethink. I headed to the sponsor of today's video's website, Audio, and used my favourite tool there, Hands AI, to search for an adrenaline-filled, action-packed race with a resolution, which led to this banger. I know, I'm not Christopher Nolan and this isn't Interstellar, but I loved it. I thought it worked really well. And because Audio not only has an enormous, ever-expanding library of music, but sound effects too, I also pulled a bunch of sound effects from their library to put together a little library of my own inside the project and start building the edit with it, as sound design was going to be really helpful in building the emotion in a few key parts of this edit. Even if you don't plan on signing up today, you should definitely check out Audio and see what they've got to offer. Follow the link at the top of the description. And if you do decide to sign up, make sure to use code PETER70 for a mammoth 70% off your first year of Audio Pro subscription on what is already one of the most affordable platforms out there. Thank you to Audio for sponsoring this video. As I started to build the edit though, I realised that the pacing to fit the approach I was taking edit-wise was going to require a fair few additional shots to build it out. I got my old Lauer T14 probe out, shot a few textural shots of my housemate's passport cover and my spectating eyeball. I asked Helen to see if I could get another case sent to my house, so in my own time I could film a few old close-up rigged pickup shots of the case. Whilst I waited for the delivery of this, I exported what we knew were going to be some of the shots that visual effects whiz Ben was going to have to get started working on, and I shared this rough assembly. Well, this is rather unorthodox. One case, one driver. Not quite what we're used to on a Sunday afternoon, but let's go with it. Andy's off the line, through baggage claim, past a startled barista, and now hammering it down the taxiway like he's late for a Ryanair flight. He sets a blistering lap, 102.7. Not bad for a layout that includes a moving walkway and a security checkpoint. But hang on. Contact. He's clipped that case on the corner towards gate 23. That'll buff out, but I'm not sure the airport authorities will be quite as forgiving. And with that, the checkered flag waves. What a peculiar but strangely thrilling run. What a case. What a companion. Your journey, your race. This then went off to the client for feedback whilst I was away on another job, as although I still had some pickup shots to get, the turnaround time for the edit was relatively tight, so I thought it was best to share something with them sooner rather than later. A little over 48 hours after sending, Helen forwarded me this email with their notes and feedback. They opened it with a polite response, but ultimately, reading between the lines, or maybe not even between the lines, they didn't like it. The next day, I captured a handful of pickup shots around my house using my own hand and a similar looking long sleeve blue top to that of the on-screen talent. I also added in this textural cutaway from the airport that I captured on my iPhone whilst passing through customs on the way back from the other job. It does stick out like a sore thumb in these ungraded rushes, but I think it worked out all right in the final graded piece. When I'm involved as an editor, it's at this point in the process that I begin to struggle. I just start to not enjoy it. I'm often trying to please the client, making the changes to their comments and wishes, but most of the time this is against my better judgment. So there's this weird dance where I'm trying to make everyone happy, but ultimately that's never really possible. I then sent off the updated edit. After this is where I start to find the edit side of a job frustrating. Not on this job in particular, just on jobs in general. Increasing rounds of amends and working against what my instinct of what is best for the edit is a little soul destroying. It obviously can lead to a better end product. Collaboration is what normally does that. And all of what we deem as a good end product in terms of creative is entirely subjective. So what I think you might totally disagree with. But in my opinion, there's a bit of a sweet spot where you start to have too many cooks in the kitchen and things start to get ultimately worse, with plenty of exceptions. But with all of this in mind, I was very happy to have agreed up front that at this stage of things, control would go over to Detail's in-house editor, Jess. Meanwhile, though, hunched in front of a machine in another part of the country was VFX whiz, post-specializing art director, Ben Watson, who I thought it would be great to chat to for myself as much as for you to get a better understanding of how he did everything. But we ended up chatting for well over an hour. So that'll be another video because this one's starting to run kind of long. I'm super happy with Ben's end results here. I think he did a great job, as did Jess the editor and Cam, who went on to do the grade. But the overall final piece, the one that actually saw the light of day, well, I'll let you see that now and judge for yourself. I don't think it's quite going to make it to the show reel, but I might do a director's cut and give it some love on socials at some point. Thank you to Detail for having me along for this one. And thank you particularly to Callum for going above and beyond his paycheck in an effort to try and make this a banger. YouTube thinks you'd probably like to watch this video next. And make sure to subscribe for more semi-helpful tips and interesting insider industry knowledge.